We are going to talk about cover crops and 2019 considerations in this year when we're looking at prevented planting. When we're looking at prevented planting in 2019, there are two considerations that we have to think about. One is relative to crop insurance and planting cover crops and the market facilitation program. I'm going to talk about both of those as we're moving through this session here. For crop insurance, the basic summary of this is that you will be able to get 100% of the prevented planting payment if you plant a cover crop and you do not harvest, hay, or graze that cover crop. So if that's your position, you're not going to hay, graze, or harvest that cover crop, then you're fairly safe in planting that cover crop. You can use soybeans as a cover crop for a corn prevented planting acre. Now, if you do that, there could be some adjusting requirements because it's pretty hard to tell a soybean prevent plant acre versus a soybean acre. You cannot use soybeans as a cover crop for a soybean prevent plant acre. You could actually use corn, but that's probably not realistic. Now we're going to go into more detail about those decisions and those considerations, particularly as they relate to haying and grazing. And the final plant date is important when we're looking at that. June 5th is the final plant date for corn across most of the Illinois, May 31st in the lower 7 counties. For soybeans, the final plant date is June 15th. And June 20th for the central and southern part of the state. Those, again, final plant dates are critical for looking at haying or grazing. If you planted a cover crop before the final plant date, and this might be the case where you planted a cover crop last year and never got anything done with that, you can still receive 100% of your prevented planting payment if you hay or graze it before the final planting date. So if the final plant date is June 5th for corn, you could have hay or grazed it before that date. You can also hay or graze it on or after November 1. So between the final plant date and November 1, you should not be haying or grazing it. And you can get 100% of your prevent plant payment if you don't do any haying or grazing. You would get 35% of your prevent plant payment if you hayed or grazed it between final plant date, June 5th for corn, and November 1. And you will get no payment if you harvest it. And harvest this would be you run it through a combine, for example, would be harvesting it. So if you harvest it, there would be no prevent plant payment. All right, if you plant the cover crop during the late planting period, which in Illinois runs 20 days, so for corn it's June 5th for most of the state, for the next 20 days, June 20 to June 25th or June 26th, you would get if you plant the cover crop during that period, you'd get 100% of the prevent plant payment if you, again, no haying or grazing, or you hay or grazed it after November 1. You will get no prevent payment if you hay or graze it before November 1 or harvest it. All right, if you plant the cover crop after the late planting period, so that's 20 days for corn after the final plant date, 25 days for soybean, you will get, again, all of the prevent plant payment if you do no haying or grazing or hay or graze it after November 1. 35% of the prevent plant payment will be received if you hay or graze it before November 1. So in this case, if you're a livestock farmer still thinking you need a forage from that cover crop, if you plant it after the late planting period, hay or graze it, as this thing stands now, you would get 35% of your prevent plant payment. There is some discussion of relaxing the haying or grazing requirements for the cover crop. So that would take the November date out of that consideration and you could hay or graze it. That has not happened at this point in time. We will update or look for updates on Farm Doc Daily and Farm Doc, and we will keep you updated as those rules are changed. The market facilitation program this year has a recent press release has suggested that there will be a minimal market facilitation program payment if a cover crop is planted and it has the potential to be harvested. So we plant a cover crop, it has the potential to be harvested. I don't know there's no definition of the potential to be harvested. I would suspect, for example, cereal rye has the potential to be harvested because you could get rye seed from it by running it through the combine, but that's just a guess on my part. And there's also no definition of minimal, so we don't know what those rules are. That in and of itself will not change the crop insurance rules. The potential to be harvested, if you still harvest it before November 1 as things stand, or even after November 1, and if you hay or graze it, you will still be subject to the rules that I just discussed. Again, that may change if USDA decides to change those rules. If no haying or grazing, the rules are pretty simple. You can plant a cover crop and not have any ramifications as far as prevented planting payments. We may see some relaxing of haying or grazing rules, but it has not happened yet, and we don't know much about the MFP program and what those minimal payments may look like with cover crops that have the potential to be harvested. Keep listening to Farm Doc, and we will keep you updated as those rules change. So look at Farm Doc, and we appreciate you listening and taking this information into consideration.